People in cults are temporarily deprived of common sense for the duration. After withdrawing from the cult's oppressive control over their lives, they tend to feel liberated, if somewhat foolish. There are perhaps millions of Trump supporters now wondering, how could I have ever had so much faith in that man? It's the same with Reverend Moon and the ridiculous Unification Church, or Scientology. Anyway, when you're in cult mode, you can't bear to hear the accusation. It's too painful to conclude you've been deeply wrong and misled. But if it walks like a cult, and talks like a cult, and it behaves like a cult, it's a cult. I personally think this personality cult has seriously damaged a once important political force.
And now we return to where we started. The RCP, or REVCOMs as they call themselves now, putter on. The wild demonstrations continue to frustrate activists. They've shown up in Ferguson during the protests against the murder of Michael Brown in 2014. They were at the Women's March against Donald Trump in 2017. And recently, they were at the anti-Dobbs rallies in 2022, as mentioned earlier. Other major publicity stunts have also been attempted, including a widely publicized talk between noted activist Cornel West and Bob Avakian. There's even a spoken word hip-hop EP. I'm not kidding.
Capitalist vultures, big-time and worldwide exploiters, preaching about personal responsibility, ranting about predators and criminality, terrorizing the youth in the inner cities, while you loot everywhere you see, slaughter people and rain destruction through crimes untold, all to enforce your rule and amass your gold on the backs of billions, chaining them in slavery, new and old. Your time in history, it's gone. It's all played out. A homicidal epithet from days of slave ship nightmare. Plantation overseers with whips, lynch mobs, racist whites on power trips. Repeated still now by far too many. Openly racist or hyped as hip and cool. Frat boys blasting rap. Who do they think they fool? A word that bites deeper than a frothing rabid beast, that shouts the horror of centuries, cruelty and brutality. A word nobody should want to use. A word that just can't be made good, even if a shout out to homies in the hood. This word and everything it stands for, it's long past time it be all laid out. I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind. That craziness about being like Scarface, acting without a trace of humanity, plundering and violating without remorse, killing and dying for no good purpose. Give it up. It's all laid out.
In 2016, Gregory Lee Johnson, still a member of the RCP, went to the Republican convention in Cleveland that year, and yet again burned an American flag. He was arrested yet again, and instead of another lengthy court battle, the city paid a settlement with him, totaling $225,000. That same year, Kusama quietly disbanded. A member who is known as Chegets Guevara wrote an in-depth obituary of the group.
At Kusama's peak, we were the target of an FBI raid and Glenn Beck's radio and TV ire. We had 1 million page hits a year on our blog. We had comrades who were part of struggle in living history. We were sending comrades to Nepal and Greece, to Jackson, Mississippi, to investigate the struggles there firsthand. We brought together communist and anarchist forces up and down the West Coast for the Everything for Everyone festival. Our comrades played key roles in Occupy around the country, including the Occupied Wall Street Journal. We were in discussions with a number of different organizations for a merger of post-Occupy communist organizations. People who weren't in Kusama and who were even opposed to our politics said we were the must-read communist blog.
Marxist blogger Louis Proyect also recalled the sudden and quiet departure of the group. He was far less charitable, recalling how the group couldn't shake from its extremist politics, which hindered it from achieving real relevancy.
In 2011, Eli and fellow Kusama Project notable Eric Ribelarsi were giving a talk in the now-defunct Brecht Forum in New York City, a victim of rising real estate prices rather than dogmatism that was meant to introduce the project to a broader audience. I took the trouble to bring my video camera down there with me to record the event and help publicize it, but Eli nixed it because it might be used by the cops. The idea that the FBI had no idea what Eli and Ribelarsi were up to was nonsense. Furthermore, they were not like Syrians or Iranians whose identity had to be protected. Instead, it was just a silly acting out of notions of what it meant to go up against the man. Eli also could have given me the green light to record the audio, but probably preferred to sustain the illusion that they were operating in Tsarist Russia in 1902 or something. I should add that Eli's talk betrayed the ultra-leftism that would keep the Kasama project from reaching its potential. He talked about how the Greek left was getting things done, which meant how some guy drove a car through the front door of a bank. Considering the horrible disunity in Greece that makes effective action against the austerity regime so difficult, the last thing that is needed is tactical militancy.
Something more sinister may be afoot with the collapse of Kasama as well. Per ISO leaks, a Twitter account that documents abuse in leftist groups, they had found evidence to suggest that it may have been a sexual assault allegation that did them in. This seems to corroborate with the account of Chegits, who mentioned the issue of male chauvinism and some sort of investigation that left many in the group resigning. Moving to today, RCP now runs a number of front groups, including Stop Patriarchy, an anti-porn group, Refuse Fascism, which is explicitly anti-MAGA, and Rise Up for abortion rights, behind the aforementioned wild anti-Dobbs rallies. Sometimes these groups, along with Avakian himself, advertise themselves on Instagram. The only other development is that they call themselves the REVCOMs nowadays. On the left writ large, REVCOMs are still widely mocked, with avoiding them as an unwritten rule. Many have commented on the group with disdain or denouncement. Even figures of the internet left mock and deride them regularly.
Basically Bob's cult. So I wanted...
Yeah, they call it used to be called the Revolutionary Communist Party, but they've operated under a whole bunch of other names as well.
Okay, so I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your concerns.
Well, that's about all I know about them. Back in late 2002, early 2003, before the war in Iraq had started, but when Trump or when Bush and Cheney were leading up to it, I was traveling around the country speaking on that issue. And one of these groups invited me to speak at a rally that they had put together at a large church in New York City. And I showed up and along with a couple of other progressives. And, we gave our speeches and we were the draw names, right? When we left, the Avakian cult people got up and just basically, started pitching their stuff. And they were going through the crowd taking names and addresses and stuff, email addresses and whatnot. And that was when we realized that there was something going on here that had nothing to do with stopping the war.
Anyway, I remember going to a political or an academic conference once and being approached by this weird group they were Maoists. Hyena, sweetie, do you remember the name of their organization? It was something like Communist Party of the United States of America or something like that. It's a small organization led by some dude who's written 1 million fucking books, and everyone in that org treated him like a cult leader. Everyone in there treated him like a cult leader. At the time, I was really new to leftism, so I was just like, oh, cool, real lefties, But then they were like, you should consider buying his books. Bob Avakian, my man! The chairman of the Revolutionary Communist Party, USA. When I first met these guys at the academic conference, they were like super nice at first, but then they were like, you should buy this book. You can't really claim to be a leftist unless you're familiar with Bob Avakian's immortal, emancipatory strategies. Joking. They took down my phone number when I signed up with them as part of the oh, here, in case we ever have any news or there's any sort of events going on or anything. They took down my number and I started getting continuous calls from this one Chinese woman who would call me and no shit, spent 20 minutes talking to me about her day before being like, now, if you really cared, you would buy our book. Called me on my cell phone.
The reality is, people feel this way. They feel this way. They see this. They're angry about this. They're apparently part of a cult, unfortunately. Wait, really? What fucking cult? What? Hey, I see a lot of... Oh, they are a cult? Hey, I see a lot of friends rise up for abortion rights. They are not friends. They are an anti-trans hate group pyramid scheme led by a white male cult leader. What the fuck? Forced motherhood is female enslavement illegitimate? Oh, they're fucking REVCOM. God damn it, dude. How? How does Bob Avakian pull this shit off, dude? What the fuck? They are cult. They are a fucking cult. God damn it, dude. Okay, so the rise up for abortion rights is they're not adorning the classic fucking all black attire that they have with like the fucking the brochure, the pamphlets they run around with. Oh my god, REVCOM. If you've ever attended a protest and you see some of the crustiest motherfuckers on the planet literally trying to subvert the protest and like acting like they run the show and immediately being like, it's not enough, what's happening at this protest is not enough, and now this protest is like officially a communist protest, revolution now, one of those type beats, those are the REVCOM dudes, okay? You can spot them because they look crusty as a motherfucker, okay? Also, the fact that you guys don't know what REVCOM is implies that, like, you don't really attend a lot of protests, I think, because, goddamn, how do you deal with them? You just can't deal with them, dude. They're not going to go away. And, they are wreckers, though, for the most part.
Yet despite all of this, how does this group survive? How does a group run by someone who is, in my opinion, clearly somewhere on the narcissistic spectrum, continue to make money and garner a following? Moreover, how the fuck did Chairman Bob end up such a doofus? By his own account, Avakian had a good childhood and loving parents, but his convictions, and what I see as his narcissism, led him to create a cult that ruins the lives of the particularly idealistic or desperate. One of the things I took away from my reading of his autobiography is just how boring it is. Not only is he an incredibly dry and rambling writer, he comes off as particularly self-absorbed. There are minor nuggets of substance strewn throughout the labyrinth of text that is From Ike to Mao, but it's drowned out by what can only be described as the boomer stories of an old man with nothing to show for his life other than bad decisions. Take the following passage, which is a great example of the intellectual prowess of this man.
You'd see women active in playing crucial roles in all different shapes of Chinese society, even though, as the Chinese comrades themselves acknowledged, they still had a long way to go. I was struck recently by watching that movie, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because that is a set, obviously, in pre-revolutionary China, and you see how deep the feudal stuff was. If you look at that movie, and you are aware of what happened in China after the revolution, you can't help thinking, my God, if you'll pardon the expression, within 20 years or so after the revolution triumphed, they'd made these tremendous transformations. And not only in an overall sense, but specifically with regard to the role and status of women in the society.
Yes, the great helmsman of New Communism, the creator of the New Synthesis, is citing a movie with fucking magic and wire kung fu as a peek into Chinese history. This is like when at a 2006 press conference, a representative of Sony called the samurai video game Genji 2 historically inspired before a giant enemy crab appeared on the screen. I would be lying if I didn't say reading this was a chore, but then shit like this occasionally pops up and you can't help but laugh. I mean, some pages later, he goes on paragraph to paragraph, shitting on his political opponents during the RCP purge, and then starts rambling about Jimmy Buffett and smoking weed, before then getting back into denouncing the Mensheviks. This shit is insane, and sometimes hilarious, but then you remember, this man runs a group that slavishly promotes him as a great thinker. They sell his books at protests, chant about when the revolution comes like gospel singers, and do all this nutty stuff while Avakian lives in France. It's all rather goofy, and the more I dug into it, I found myself at impasses, partially from the silliness and irrelevancy, but also from how heinous the emotional abuse was. Reading out of the Red Closet in particular was simultaneously harrowing and frustrating. It's largely why I got burned out by the time I got around to reading The New Synthesis or whatever. Like, how can you read about all that abuse and then just take this group seriously at all? Like, it's one thing to abuse all of this member commitment, but it's only made worse when you look at RCP's homophobic past, and yet they actively recruit queer people into this organization. They prey on the poor and minorities of all stripes as well. What for? I think it's probably just to sell more merch. It seems to be a common MO amongst left cults. The REVCOMs run 2 Revolution bookstores, one in New York City and one in Berkeley, California. While I can't imagine they take in too much money, the rent is quite expensive, especially in New York City. As highlighted by activist, journalist, and poet James J. Jackson Jr.,
I am wondering where the profits from their stores go. Their shoddy and impossible look at website makes it pretty evident that funds are not being directed towards developing the organizational infrastructure. These funds are definitely not going towards mutual aid projects either. The RCP explicitly rejects anything it considers charity, including the anarchistic idea of mutual aid. According to their atrocious website, they are currently raising funds for their ongoing Revolution tour, claiming they will be using the money to send their Revolution Club around the country to participate in direct actions. None of the actual actions they will participate in are listed on the website, and at no point is there any detail on how the money raised will actually be used. They do not even mention what they hope to accomplish by sending their members on the so-called tour. Based on the behavior that I've witnessed, they'll probably just be invading other people's events.
At least to me, it's very clear that this is Avakian's full-time job. Meanwhile, how much do those working at the bookstores make? How is this money funneled to those working full-time or putting in all these man-hours? From what I've read, most of this work is volunteer. It's likely the money is going to Avakian, and maybe his clique of cronies. It doesn't seem like Chairman Bob or his friends are living as ascetics after all. Alas, I have no proof, and I could very well be wrong, but the circumstantial evidence suggests this as such. And that highlights my frustration. All of these people who wrote Out of the Red Closet always seem to talk about their belief in the group as if it wasn't all bad, that there is some sort of kernel of truth that the RCP of yesteryear was honorable or productive politically, if you can even call their activism politics. They saw this abuse of queer people. They got arrested, and they saw their comrade get straight up murdered. Despite all of this, what did they have to show for it? Maybe a couple of unionization efforts in the early 70s? A short stint as political stooges for a country that they even admitted supported some incredibly noxious regimes? Some protests where they acted like buffoons? Selling a shitty newspaper? Sustaining the life of a talentless hack? But at some level, we need to understand that these people were in a group that altered their outlook in a specifically negative way. For all of its faults, this group offered something to vulnerable people. Cult expert Yanya Lalich defines a cult as a high control group that requires a high level of commitment in service of a leader, ideology, or both. There are 4 main ingredients to such a group. 1. A charismatic leader who charms and pushes people into the group. 2. A transcendent belief system, that is, an ideological system that purports to solve all things in the world. All problems are solved by this ideology, should it be followed correctly. This leads to number 3, systems of control. In service of this belief, work is demanded. There are numerous new activities that are slowly required, study sessions, volunteer work, and more. Much like the old wives' tale of the frog slowly boiling in a pot of water, the person doesn't even notice due to our final ingredient. Number 4, systems of influence. Peer pressure from other members remolds you in the group's image. Fear of persecution or being convinced of the internal wrongness of the outside world makes the cult member reject outside explanations. Critical thinking is discouraged in favor of groupthink. And this is where my frustrations have to take a back seat. All 4 of these describe the REVCOMs. Despite how maddening their logic is, these people were in a cult. They were abused into thinking this way. The RCP is not a serious group. It is, again, unspoken knowledge that they are nutty, and I hope now it's even more clear to stay away from them. In my neighborhood, which communist groups frequently post flyers in, it's pretty common to see their propaganda vandalized, sometimes by people hoping to warn others to avoid the group altogether. If you are a member of RCP, please share your experiences here online. Spread it far and wide on why they are unproductive. If you found this series by accident, maybe because an RCP member talked to you on campus, or they flyered at your local Pride event, I hope you found this useful. And to put it as bluntly as possible, don't join a fucking cult, because I'm sure as fuck these people did.
All played out. We must broadly unite to carry out the fight, to resist the crimes of this system. But on the real revolution is the only solution. So we need to call out things whose time has run out, which keep people in chains, suffering unbearable pain. These things are all played out. Capitalist vultures, big-time and worldwide exploiters, preaching about